right, welcome. This is the Whitman Finance Committee meeting. Today is Monday, March 1st, 2021. We're meeting on the virtual platform with Whitman Hanson Community Access. And I'll just take a minute. I did email out the agenda in advance, just run through very quickly the agenda for tonight's meeting. We have 2 meeting minutes that we would like to see if we can review and vote. The reserve fund stands currently at $37,321.20. The public forum is temporarily suspended due to the conditions of the pandemic. So if anybody from the public wishes to get some information or a question to the Finance Committee, I ask that you send an email to randerson@whitman/ma.gov, or you could call my home phone at 781-447-4366, and we will answer your question in the order that it came. So under new business tonight, we're just going to talk about general topic is the budget. Under old business, we do have some place setters that we typically keep on our agenda. We have subcommittee reports. We talk about the Whitman Hanson Regional School District assessment, non-mandated busing, and an audit. Also on old business is the annual town meeting and special town meeting warrants. And then, so other business, we typically have communications. We do have one communication from Norfolk County Agricultural High School that I did forward to the committee. And then we hear from our town administrator and the accountant give updates. So upcoming meetings were posted now until town meeting for every Monday until town meeting, whenever that date will be. It's still to be determined. Okay, with that, the pleasure of the committee to review and approve, if we can, the meeting minutes that were sent in advance.
Yep.
Okay, so we have meeting minutes from February 16th. Does anybody not have a copy of the meeting minutes? Okay, so it starts on page 381. Basically, the first page was approving 3 previous meeting minutes. And then we welcomed our new town administrator at this particular meeting. Anybody have anything to change on that page? Okay, on the second page, we just kind of gave an overview of where we've been so far. Ken Lytle gave a little bit of information. Mr. Heineman gave a little bit of an overview as well. So we talked about 5-year trending reports for each department. Ms. Conley requested that information, and also talked a little bit about the Madden recommendation. And at the end of that page, 382, Mr. Galvin gave a report from the Whitman Middle School building committee. Anybody have anything they'd like to change on that page, 382? And seeing none, we'll move to page 383. This was talking a little bit about transportation from the district. We did a straw poll about using a hybrid method to set the assessment. And we talked a little bit about the audit, and the final part was a communication from the Board of Selectmen to open the annual and special town meeting warrants. And that concludes the meeting minutes on page 383. Anybody have anything they'd like to change on that?
I'll move the minutes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes. Further discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Kathleen?
Yes.
John Noon?
Yes.
John Galvin?
Yes.
Dave?
Abstain?
Abstain. Chuck?
Yes.
Rosemary?
Yes.
Ralph, welcome to the meeting.
Yes, I'm glad to.
Okay, and Al?
Yeah, yes, Rick, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much. And I will vote yes. So we have approved the meeting minutes from the February 16th meeting. So moving on to the next meeting minutes, we have meeting minutes from February 22nd. This one is only 2 pages. So page 1 is page 384. It basically starts out with a request for a moment of silence for the people who lost their lives due to COVID-19. Our town administrator gave a little bit of information, and then I read Ken Lidle's email and the updates that he wanted the committee to have. And at the end of that particular page, Ms. Conley asked about property re-evaluations. Anything to edit on that page? Seeing none, we'll move to page 385, the final page in this particular meeting minutes. It starts with the deficit in the budget, some more discussion from our town administrator, and the end would be the notice about the informational meeting regarding non-mandated busing. And the meeting adjourned at 7:26. Anything to change on this amend or add or subtract? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the February 22nd meeting minutes. We have a motion.
Second.
And we have a second. Further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Kathleen?
Yes.
John Noon?
Yes.
John Galvin?
Yes.
Dave?
Abstain.
Chuck?
Yes.
Ralph?
I have to abstain. I wasn't there.
Very good. Thank you. Al?
Yes.
And I will vote yes. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you,
Al, were
Samantha.
you absent from that?
Oh, I might have
Yep.
I was.
We'll change his yes to an abstain then.
abstained. I apologize.
No problem. Thank you.
Situated here.
All right, so that moves us into the new business item to discuss the budget. So a couple of things. I know we're still waiting for the final information from the district regarding the budget. So maybe we'll start out, John Galvin, if you want to give a little bit of information on the rolling 5-year expenditures by department, the sheet that, spreadsheet that Ken Lidle put together, and then you put a little
Yeah,
addition on the end.
Ken is actually in the meeting, so I would.
Okay,
maybe
Ken,
we
you want to
wanna let-
queue up the, welcome?
I see
Ken.
him. I don't know that he's hearing us. There he is.
Oh,
I can hear you, but my video is disabled.
The
Okay,
video is disabled.
that's all right. We'll just
My
go with
video
your
is
voice.
disabled too. I don't know if something's going on with the video or.
Hmm.
And I think
Okay,
Al's
Robert.
is, if I'm looking, Al's is disabled as well.
Yeah, that's
I
interesting.
mean, as long as you can
John-
hear me, I guess that's
Right,
the biggest part.
sure. John, do you think it has something to do with the amount of people on, or?
I don't know. I'm trying to see if I can. Hold on.
It says the host is disabled. You.
That's what mine says.
Not a bad day, is it?
Hold on.
You've been disabled by better.
Back.
The avatar is probably a better view anyway.
I don't know. It's all moving around. It's weird.
I have my picture from like the 80s.
Better than a
Uh,
mugshot.
Every time I try to
Yeah.
I
click
didn't
on
say
it,
it wasn't.
All right, well, while you're working on that, Ken, you would like to talk just a little bit about the rolling 5-year expenditures by department that you put together?
So I took the previous 5 completed fiscal years, FY16 to FY20. I used only the departments that had a specific department head assigned to them. So I didn't include sections of the budget like legal, the town hall maintenance group. I don't believe I included animal control. So I took the 5 years of actual expenditures for those 5 years, and then I took the increases from 16 to 17, 17 to 18, 18 to 19, and 19 to 20, and noted the percent increases. And I believe John also included the dollar amounts as well. I don't know if that was a year by year or just a total.
total.
And for the extreme outliers, which tended to be plus or minus 10% in a given year, I went to find out why there was an increase or a decrease in some cases, and I tried to provide that on the sheet. There weren't too many, thankfully, but they were explainable. And then John added to it to show what the increase was for each department over those 5 years, and what its contribution was.
Okay,
Just
now,
quickly,
Rosemary, this was
just
a,
quick.
go ahead.
This was a request by me, but just quickly, the two lines on those that have costs of like construction and other things, capital costs are VOTEC and the high school, but you remove those from the other ones, is that correct? So like the police won't have their, large equipment won't be included in the fire, police or DPW budgets,
Thank you.
but is that correct?
This
Ken,
is
do you
just
understand the
Article 2.
question?
If you don't understand the question, you can just let me know and I'll try to rephrase it.
This is just Article 2. This did not include any capital requests. So there were no vehicles, no debt payments, no construction, none of that. It was just strictly.
But those
what
are
you-
included in those two budgets, no matter what, correct? So those are included in the police, no, I mean, in the VOTEC and the schools, just so people understand why they might be a little higher.
The schools, I know for the South Shore VOTEC, it was just their assessment.
It's in there, it's included in their assessment, I believe, both of them are. The capital stuff, a lot of it.
So is your question, Rosemary, just to make
Just
the
to highlight
document-
that there are expenses, OPEC, other things that are in these budgets, because when we say, oh, they're outliers, we also have to keep in mind there are things in those budgets because they're separate entities. They're not part of the town per se, that they do cover that these other departments don't do. So those two aren't apples for apples is essentially what I'm trying to say.
Well, the capital, the debt for the high school is not in the regional school district amounts that we see there. That's a separate line item in the assessment, and it's broken out. And so, I mean, looking at those numbers, those are what the straight assessments were. They didn't include capital items or the debt for the high school or anything like that, or the non-mandated busing for that matter. So,
Right. So
that
the
is-
vocational schools is really the only one that falls in that category, right?
yeah,
Rosemary?
I think that there are some things that does handle their own OPEG, OPEG,
Right. Well, I think
insurance
if we
and other
just keep
things. So
that, Yeah.
it's just not, I'm not saying that it's not close, but I want to keep that in mind when we're
that's
doing.
right. Okay. As long as we keep that in mind, that's fine. Yep.
Just-
Thank you very
yeah.
much.
Just FYI to everybody that hasn't been able to start their video, you should be able to start it now. I figured out what was going on. So you should be all set now.
Thank you, John.
Thank you,
Yep, thank you,
John.
John.
Okay, so do you want to talk a little bit about how you added the columns to the end of the document, John?
Yeah, well, I mean, all I really did is take the dollar amounts from the change in dollar amounts. So basically, on the total line, there was a, $5,763,588 new dollars spent in these, in all of these items. And then I just broke it out by each line item so we could see where all the new dollars went. I thought it was just a little bit easier to see where all the money was going and to which department, in addition to just percentages, because the percentages of change were, hard to exactly say what was involved with, the amount of money being spent.
Okay. So Rosemary, this information then is helpful. I certainly think it's going to help the finance committee as we look forward to reviewing all of the budgets from each department.
Yeah, I think it's helpful in terms of when we're tracking for the schools, we're kind of watching that we're providing the same investment in regional and for the regional students and the vocational students, that we're kind of tracking that as far as how we're investing to each kid for that comparison, but also watching how we're investing. I think we see I think I tried to cut a budget that's the highest. When we were cutting back, you can see we trended forward. We're still trending pretty high on that. There might be a reason, but we still have to have something to look at to ask those questions. Something like
Okay.
this is helpful.
Very good. Thank you. Chuck?
Yeah, so what I see with these numbers, because I was watching a little bit of last week's school committee, and on one of the screen shares, they broke out the assessment or the percentage that the towns gave to the schools. And I think what we do last year was roughly 5%. There was a 3% going backwards. And when I first got on the finance committee, there was a couple of years where it was minimal, and it was hard for the schools because we were only given a minimal. So when I look at these numbers, that reflects that we have supported the schools, and we have increased the support to the schools over the last 3 years quite a bit. Just the way I see the numbers, I see that we are, giving them money to work with.
We're on track. We're on track. I did a breakout of every town in Plymouth County, and I broke out how much each town spends per capita. So essentially, if everybody got an individual bill, and Hanson was the lowest paying for schools, and Whitman was the second in Plymouth County. So we have a lot of work to do. We were doing great for really low for general government, and we were on point for police and fire. We were doing well, but we weren't overpaying. But I mean, I think thinking that way, like if everyone got a bill, how much are they paying for these things? Is a good way to think about it. And I think our 5-year trend is a nice trend to get to a better place for schools, but I couldn't say that we were there.
Okay, great. Dave, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Rosemary has discussed something, a document that she has produced but didn't provide for this committee. I was wondering if she could provide a copy of that for the committee.
I'll have to type it all out, Dave, but that's fine. But what you could do is I used 2018 numbers because that's the only ones that were provided. 2018 numbers for every town in Plymouth County. And you could also do the same math, just break it out.
The subject that you're providing is more relevant to a school committee meeting, but the information that you're bringing to here is more relevant for this.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll actually break it out and I'll give you the documents that I use, which is on Department of Revenue dashboard, which we should all be using. The most recent numbers on the dashboard are 2008. And I was just watching for trends and seeing how we're doing comparatively.
right.
We should all be
So-
doing that anyway, but
Okay.
that's
So
what I
you
did.
can get that document, Rosemary, and I can forward it to the rest
It's
of
all written out, but I'll have to type the entire thing up. Or I can screenshot the numbers, or you could do them yourself if you'd like.
whatever
You know,
you,
they're
if
there.
you have time, I think that would be helpful. Dave, is that what you need?
That would be good.
Just some kind of document that memorializes what was discussed in this committee.
Okay.
Good point.
All right. Anybody else on the document that Ken created? And, again, this is just another tool that we're going to use when we look to equally distribute the limited resources of the taxpayer. So thank you for putting those together. Thank you, John, for amending and adding to it. I think it's a valuable tool. So anybody else on that document? Okay, so what are the other things? I know we need to get into Article 2 at some point, but again, I think the committee was pretty clear that, we really can't roll forward with the rest of the Article 2 until we get the district numbers that we could plug in. So some of the pieces of the puzzle are starting to come together. We're getting obviously closer to an assessment that's going to be provided to both towns, and then we can move forward. I think just for the purpose of this meeting, if we could just refer to the Article 2 that we're working with, which is the copy from February 9th, February 3rd. Is that the one that everybody has a copy of? It's referred to as the working copy of Article 2, or the one that John referred to as the baseline budget, right? Is that the one we're all working with?
The
No,
last,
I'm using the
last
one-
version I had was February 9th.
Me
February
too.
9th.
Yeah.
Okay, so February 9th, the baseline budget. So I think just for running through, we still have to get the Board of Selectmen or Lincoln, if you could provide we have yet to review the selectmen's budget. So lines 5 through 19, and there are other line items within Article 2 that the Board of Selectmen or the town administrator typically, gives the board some information on. So maybe in the next coming weeks, you could do a presentation with the Board of Selectmen, feedback on how, for instance, we plan to move forward with the Assistant Town Administrator and line 6 and the rest of the line items within Article 2 that fall under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, I'd be very happy to do that. I would say, as folks may know, at the Board of Selectmen meeting last Tuesday, framework that laid out as far as what the budget schedule would be going forward. From my perspective, the Board of Selectmen agreed that they thought, unanimously agreed that they thought that schedule made sense, which was presenting a balanced budget at that joint meeting that we've been talking about between the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee on April 13th. I'd be happy to talk about, obviously be happy to talk about anything, but in particular, as you said, that some of the items that are under the purview of the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator. But in that context, it would be talking about what the original request was back
Right.
in,
Absolutely.
back last year. So it may not, I'm happy to do it. It may not necessarily be meaningful because I certainly, I certainly expect a few of those numbers to change as I come up with what I, would like to recommend as for a budget, but certainly happy to talk about it. I just, I don't know if it's entirely meaningful right now, but happy to if the committee wants
Sure.
to.
So for this meeting, just maybe a general discussion about each department and when we met with each department to refresh the committee members, if in fact they want to go back and take a look at their notes from each meeting that we had with the department heads, so we can then move forward with a line-by-line discussion of Article 2. So if I can, with the board's indulgence, I'm just gonna, if we're looking at Article 2 and each department, again, we're starting at the top with the selectmen's budget, lines 5 through 19. The accountant we met with on October 27th. So again, maybe just if you want to mark up the copy of your Article 2 with the dates we met with each department head, that way you could refer back to your notes if you wanted to and get some information, or even revert back to the Zoom meeting when we met with that department if there's a question about how we want to move forward with recommendations for those departments. So is that all right with the board if we just move through Article 2 and review the dates that we met with the departments? Is anybody opposed to that?
No, that's good.
Okay. So the accountant we met with on October 27th, the assessor we met with on December 8th, and those are lines 34 through 41. For the treasurer collector, we met with that department on November 24th, if you want to make a note. Technology, lines 60 through 64, we met with on October 27th. The town clerk, lines 66 to 73, we met with on November 24th. Lines 91 through 97 were custodial and maintenance. Again, these will be under the purview of the Board of Selectmen or for our town administrator. 91 to 97, 99, 101 to 103, mailing, duplicating. That brings us to the next department, the police department, line 110 to line 123. We met with the police department on November 10th. The fire, we met with them on November 17th. Inspectional services, we met with on November 10th. Lines 166 to 168, emergency management, fall under the purview of the fire. Again, November 17th, we met with that department. 170, 173, public schools, some of that information is coming out. 175 to 179, pending Whitman Hanson Regional School District, obviously. The DPW, we did meet with them on December 1st, and the water sewer also on that same date. Health Department, January 5th, we met with that department. Council on Aging was October 27th. Animal Control, line 217, 218. Again, that will be some information that we still need to get. Also, the Veterans Department falls under the purview, Town Administrator, Board of Selectmen. Library, we met with on December 8th, which is line 225 to 231. And the last department was the Recreation Department, which we met with on December 8th. So again, it just as a matter of preparing for our discussion for how we're going to balance this budget, it may be just a good idea to have those dates so you can refer either back to the Zoom meeting or to your notes. Kathleen.
I think that we had a pretty informative meeting with Tom Hickey from the South Shore Vote Tech. I don't remember the date.
Okay, you're right. Sorry, I didn't get that one. That was on December 15th.
Okay.
I'll still vote that. Thank you, Kathleen. Okay, anybody else? Anything? Go ahead, Dave.
This list of dates just kind of put in mind of the question of when was, Ken might be able to answer this. Ken, do you know when the numbers were certified for last year? On what date?
Which numbers?
Was it the revenues in the cherry sheet?
I know the tax rate was set in November,
November.
mid-November, I believe.
Yeah.
And that was when we had the local receipts numbers finalized as part of it.
That's the one I'm looking for. Yeah.
Okay.
So you know, when everybody thinks back to these dates that we met with everyone, I just want to keep everyone in mind that you know, we had no idea of what our next fiscal year was going to look like budget wise until mid-November.
Okay, thank you, Dave. All right. So within Article 2, anything else that we need to address is, go ahead, John Noon.
I just have, I guess, a general question for Lincoln, and that would be, at some point, obviously, there's going to be a joint meeting. And is it my understanding from what you just said that you will be presenting to the Board of Selectmen either beforehand or with us a balanced budget? And
That is correct. So
go ahead, please.
yep, so that is correct. So what I'd suggested to the board and what the board agreed on this past Tuesday was that presentation of a balanced budget would be presented at a joint meeting of this committee and the board on April 13th. So to that end, what I'm going to be doing over the next month is firming up the final revenue questions that we already, we had the discussion on the last few weeks about where we might be able to tweak the revenues a little bit, and having discussions with department heads for possible reductions, obviously watching closely and providing input on the school budget and as that progresses, and then putting those pieces together and presenting a balanced budget on that date. Correct.
So Lincoln, as a follow-up then, are you looking for these departments to resubmit budgets based on the deficit that we're facing now?
I don't see it necessarily as a formal process. They made their requests. I'm certainly intending to have a conversation with department heads where the request is above level services about how that can be changed, tweaked to get us to balance. But certainly to the extent that a request was a level services budget, I'm not intending to have in-depth conversations again with department heads since it hasn't really changed much, if that makes sense.
Sure.
in that-
So we have had discussions a little bit about how we're going to affect the changes to the budget that need to happen. So, I mean, obviously, you know, we don't want to start changing line items within departments' budgets. I think we talked about that pretty strongly. We also probably don't have time to meet with every department again. So I don't know, what is the sense of the board? Are we requesting that you know, following your discussions with budget managers, that the budgets get resubmitted to Ken and then uploaded into our working copy of Article 2? How do you plan to get the information to the Finance Committee?
Sure. So my intention would be, you know, to where reductions may be necessary, you know, effectuate those and then present that to both the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen on April 13th.
So we wouldn't necessarily be going in with a balanced budget, then we'd be going in with the tools to create a balanced budget.
No, my intention would be to create a balanced budget by that date and present it on that date. You know, I mean, as far as what mix of budget reductions slash, you know, slash possible use of other revenues of other sources, for example, free cash. Obviously, that's the very last resort, but that mix of what that's going to be, I mean, I'll know over the next couple of weeks. My intention and what the Board of Selectmen wanted and you know, was relaying that they wanted was a presentation of a budget, of a balanced budget on that date. So, you know, I'm not going to know for sure. I can't promise you that I'll know for sure where I'm going to propose, whether it's reductions or particular use of free cash before April 13th. I can't promise that at this point, but I can promise you that you'd have it by April 13th.
Okay, Chuck?
Oh, with that being said, Lincoln, maybe that date of the 13th should be a little flexible. I think maybe the rest of the board here, maybe Lincoln, as you have your discussions and you come up with some proposals, I think it would be good for the committee to hear your findings and your suggestions and your proposals before we go in and sit down with the Board of Selectmen and figure it all out that night. In the past, we've had some situations where we've worked very hard and we've come up with some plans and the rug has been pulled out from under us at the last minute. And I think decisions were made that weren't very popular with the committee. So myself, I would feel comfortable as you work towards getting some of that information to have that shared, to share that with us prior to getting in there.
Yeah, I can do that. I mean, certainly, you know, at the end of the day, as this committee knows, at the end of the day, it's a math problem. Not, I want to say a problem, a math issue, right? So there are level services that we want to provide, right? And there are limited funding sources. So I think, you know, I mean, to the extent, I mean, I can tell you right now, to the extent that there are requests from department heads that are above and beyond level services budget, I can tell you right now that those are going to receive a very close eye from me, just simply because we do not have the revenues. I mean, this committee knows that from looking at the revenues longer than I have, that the revenues are not there for a significant increase in, you know, in services, in service levels. So, I mean, I'd certainly say, I mean, I don't think that from the discussions that this committee's already had, I don't think there's going to be anything on April 13th that would be a surprise, I think, from what folks already know about what revenues are and what a level services budget means. Does that make sense? I mean, you know,
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
I don't want to have this conversation, you know, without some direct input from the Board of Selectmen as well. What I would say is that I'm certainly welcome. I mean, if there are other ideas, either for expenditures or revenues that this committee as a whole or members individually, you know, want to talk about, I'd love to hear them. You know, but I would say that I'm sort of projecting, I'm sort of telegraphing here a little bit, but that I don't think it's going to be too far outside what you folks probably have already come to in your own minds. Does that make sense?
Yep,
Yeah,
if I-
well, yeah, and hopefully that's the case. I'm just, I think, maybe the people in the committee can remember, a couple of years ago, there was some decisions made at the last minute on how much free cash we were going to use, and just some stuff that, I don't know, I thought it was kind of a surprise at the end. It sounds like things are being thought out a little bit more, and hopefully that's part of your expertise and the numbers will work. And like you said, in the end, it's a math problem. But hopefully, we can, unfortunately, with the deficit, hopefully it'll probably come from reduction and not from pulling money out from where we can't really afford it.
Yeah, I mean, to sort of telegraph this a little bit, there are, right? So we essentially know what a level services budget, not a level funded budget, but a level services budget looks like, right? I mean, there are particular increases that, folks on this committee certainly know about. And that's my intention is to come with a level services budget. Will that involve some use of free cash? Possibly, perhaps, probably, depending on where the school budget ends up. But that's what's in my mind. So that's
Okay,
where I'm
understood.
intending.
Okay, so one of the other suggestions, I guess, and it's certainly the board's discretion, would be to go through, as we just did with the Article 2, and just look at town departments and get the feedback from the members of the Finance Committee when we look at a 7.2% increase request. And then members of the board would then have opinions or questions or suggestions on how they would move forward with that particular line.
Could I just say one other thing,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, which is that, certainly I think that would be, that would be a helpful exercise, either in a committee meeting or perhaps even perhaps more efficiently one-on-one if folks want to send me their thoughts. But I do think, if there are areas that this committee, wants to reduce, I mean, I'd certainly take that under advisement, and I want to know that as I'm building this balanced budget. I mean, it would be nice to know if the committee had particular ideas beforehand. I certainly cannot and would not promise that what I would suggest and what I would come up with on April 13th would include those, but I'm certainly welcome to hear, I'd certainly like to hear them and would welcome thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Kathleen and then Rosemary.
Okay, so I know that the bottom line discussion right now is premature because we just last Wednesday heard the original overview. It isn't even the presentation of the school budget, it's the overview. The line by line is coming up and then the school committee will vote it. But if we just go with that presentation, the superintendent's request translates into almost $700,000 more than we budgeted, generously putting a 5% placeholder in line 175. So it essentially has doubled our budget deficit from 600 to 1.3 million. So there's a lot of money in this Article 2 right now. And as I said, it's very premature. The school committee hasn't had a time to even see the line by line presentation and question the superintendent, but we have a lot of work to do. And Lincoln, I appreciate your approach to keeping us informed because 2 years ago, I was not on this committee. I was a concerned citizen in the audience, very angry that decisions were made to cut budgets, and it essentially translated into the schools losing 19 positions without any real public discussion. And as an attendant to the town meeting, I was furious. So I think that your approach is refreshing, that open discussions are useful. And I agree with Chuck that we've spent virtually every Monday or Tuesday night, Mondays now, meeting as a group, committing our time to doing the best we can to protect the Whitman taxpayers while providing the level services that they expect. So I do hope that we can continue to work with open discussions, not closed door meetings where decisions are made and we are kept in the dark until the very last minute where there's no chance for us to even understand the rationale.
Thank you, Kathleen. Rosemary, did you want to add something?
Yeah, when he said it would mirror similar to what we were expecting, and I, was that the Madden recommendations, close to the Madden recommendations? Because I think there's been some split here in the committee on that. I know we as a committee said those were the numbers we would like it to mirror, but
Well, I just want to reiterate, I mean, my intention is to attempt to have a level services budget. That doesn't necessarily translate to the Madden report and a 2.5% increase, right? Different departments are going to look differently. I mean, most obviously what we already know is our pension obligations and health insurance, right? We already know that, right? So that's my intention is to get there. You know, the schools obviously is the big outstanding question. And, you know, am I going to promise that we're going to get there? No, but that's my intention. So I don't know. I hope that answers the question as well as I can at this moment.
Okay, thank you, Lincoln. Dave?
I just have a comment. It's my belief that we've really put both Lincoln and the town department heads at a disadvantage. This committee has asked them to provide a budget, meet with us mostly before we even knew what our levy was for the upcoming budget year. When they did meet with us, and we had some kind of understanding of what our levy was, nobody in this committee mentioned to that department head, hey, with that type of budget, we're going to be over our levy for next year. This is unsustainable. We didn't do it during our meetings. We didn't do it after we got all the budgets in. We had to draft Article 2, and now we're asking Lincoln, new to this town, to do the heavy work for us. So on behalf of me, Lincoln, I apologize, because I've been asking, meeting and meeting again, when is this committee going to tell the department heads that the budget they provided is not sustainable? And we never did it. So that's my comment.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Dave. Just so you know, we did let the department heads know that the budget crisis had not healed itself. At every budget meeting, that was what we told them as they came in. So budgets that were submitted, it was very well communicated that they exceeded the available resources throughout the entire process. I think we made it very clear that we were not providing sustainable, the budget managers were not providing budget numbers that were part of a sustainable budget. So that was communicated, Dave. I understand your
I don't
understand
think
your
we must have
communication.
different definitions of that, Rick, because it was not communicated. Because I asked you point blank at past meeting, once we had these budgets in, has this committee gone back to the department heads? And the answer to you, to me, was no.
Right, and it's still no. Do we have an opportunity to meet with each department? No. I think the challenge that this committee faced this year was we were transitioning to a new town administrator. We didn't meet jointly with the Board of Selectmen to talk about collaborating, or we didn't do a budget manager meeting as historically has happened with the town administrator, because we were in transition. So I think that's, part of the, again, yes, we don't have all the tools. We didn't have all the information, but we need to start the budget process somewhere. And the only way really to start is to meet with the departments. So I understand, Dave. We appreciate your comment.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay, anybody else, anything to talk about with respect to the ongoing budget discussion? John New.
I think it would be helpful if the committee did go through the line items and get comfortable with not necessarily voting to make cuts, but getting a sense of where we think there are vulnerabilities. It's neat to say this, but I agree with both of you when you make the comments about notifying department heads. Because yes, we haven't told each individual department head, you've got a real problem with your budget. because we haven't taken that stand yet. Have they been warned? Well, sorta, but they've been hearing about, well, we're gonna use the Madden report, which automatically gave them some comfort, knowing that if they go by the Madden, I'm gonna get a 2.5% increase in my budget. And the reality, obviously, is some are gonna come back with cuts in the budget. They're gonna see no raise. They're actually gonna probably see a reduction unless Lincoln discovers oil somewhere under the town hall. Because the money isn't gonna be there to fund everybody at 2.5%. And it won't even allow for level funding of all of the budgets, considering the contracts that are gonna be signed in the next, whatever, 6 to 8 months for union and non-union employees, and a school budget that we're hearing could be really up there. I think we should at least go through Article 2 and kind of get a sense as a committee what we're comfortable with as far as services. And so on April 13th or whenever, and Lincoln presents us with a budget that the selectmen, the finance committee are probably going to have to live with, there'll be at least some form of a comfort zone as far as what has to be cut, as opposed to an April 13th surprise, hearing for the first time that some budgets are not going to survive. Some budgets may get a modest increase. But waiting till mid-April is, I think, going to be difficult for us as a committee to basically accept as far as a loss of services, maybe a loss of staff, whatever, to adjust to coming up with a level funded budget.
So John, I agree with your position wholeheartedly. I do think that in the next coming weeks, that this committee with Lincoln should go and talk about each department. We should look at Article 2, but look at it from the whole department and comments that each member has from the information they got from the meetings. That's why I thought it was a good exercise to review back to the date we met with them. So again, if we were talking about the police budget, we could talk about the unfilled shifts and the information that was given to us, specifically the dollar amount for that particular item, which historically, just as a matter of anecdote, has always been the police department's skin in the game. So this is the first year, Lincoln, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but this is the first year that unfilled shifts is in the police budget for this fiscal 22 budget. So again, you would get that information and I would recommend that these discussions happen in a posted meeting of the finance committee. I know, Lincoln, you said that you would invite members to individually contact you, but I would hope that we would confine our discussions about modifications to line 2 within posted meetings of the finance committee. So Lincoln, do you think that would be a good exercise?
Yeah, I do. I think it would be helpful to have, if the committee feels strongly about a particular budget item and its funding level, I think it would be certainly helpful for me to know that within the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
I do want to make it clear. I mean, when we're talking about possible reductions, I want to make it clear. I don't intend to have that. I intend to have some conversations with department heads, not in a public setting, and not in a public meeting. I just want to make that crystal clear.
Sure. We understand.
But that being said, if within the next 2 weeks I can get a sense of where the committee or a majority of the committee is on particular budgets and the bottom line on particular budgets, that would certainly be helpful.
So is the committee prepared to do that in the next 2 weeks? Perhaps not at next week's meeting, but the week after, by then using some of the tools that we have put together and looking back at the meetings that we had with departments to come up with some suggestions or, some direction for Lincoln to take in with his meeting. Rosemary.
So tools, when you say tools, one of the tools that I hope we're using is the town report. The town survey, which highlighted what people felt needed to have in the most investment, I believe. It went from, I think, schools to fire to police. And it, we can all have opinions, but it's really the community that dictates how we spend money. I mean, that's our job, is to spend money in the way they want, not the way we personally want or our friends want or people that are connected. So I think that's an important tool, and we haven't heard a lot about it. So I hope that we're using that and looking at that.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I think it's clear, but I'm just going to sort of reiterate it in case it's not. I mean, this is with the situation we have overall, this is not a build year, right? I want to reiterate when I'm looking at level services, that's the upper goal, right? Is level services within the context that we have. So I think there are desires for increased services, but I think I'm saying something that the members of this committee already know, which is that this is not a build year. I just want to say that out loud. So.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Kathleen.
Just have a quick question for you then, Lincoln, because I think it's important for me to understand how you perceive the Finance Committee's role, because I honestly believed that it was the Finance Committee's job to come up with a balanced budget. And I certainly don't want to discourage you from being part of the process. And if I'm wrong, I'm happy to learn that. But I thought all of our deliberations were geared towards coming up with a balanced budget. So who has, I don't want to say the final say at the end of the day in terms of recommending the balanced budget? It definitely should be a cooperative effort because it's a big job.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's no absolutely correct answer to that, I don't think. The Finance Committee's role, from my reading of the bylaw and my reading of the state law, is to recommend a budget to town meeting. And it's obviously town meeting's role to decide what budget is eventually adopted. It is also, though, it is the role of the Board of Selectmen to formulate the warrant. And obviously the budget is on the warrant. So my high level answer to your question, and there could certainly be different viewpoints on this, but my high level answer to your question is the Board of Selectmen are the ones who set the warrant, which includes the budget, and the advisory committee recommends to town meeting what particular budget levels and an overall budget level, and then town meeting decides. That's my reading of our bylaws and the state law.
Okay, so I think we have really established that, we have to have a collaborative effort with the Board of Selectmen in order to make the most responsible recommendations to the taxpayer. So I think that is going to be part of the process for sure. So I do think that the discussions that we have with you in the next several weeks, Lincoln, are going to, I think, bridge that gap, I would hope. Okay, anybody else on the budget specifically, or our plan to make recommendations or bring our points to Lincoln in the next 2 weeks as we review the bottom line for each town department? So I guess, the charge is to formulate the questions, formulate your thoughts on how we should make recommendations to most equitably distribute the resources of the taxpayer. John Noon.
On a more serious note, I think any of the scouts that survived this meeting should be up for at least 2 merit badges.
I agree.
Very good. So.
You know
yeah,
something, when they had the state class for this, one of the things they said is it's not, if they're wondering what we're doing here and they're looking at big governments, you can think of it not exactly, but similar to a mini Ways and Means Committee. It's kind of watch how the money's flowing, you know, and then we have people who set policies, which are selectmen, and the two need to work really closely together so that we can service you. So, or service the community. So that's kind of an understanding of what's going on here, guys.
All right, so we'll have an opportunity at the end of the meeting too to do a little Q&A. So if that's that item for new business with the budget, I'd like to move to old business and some of our place setters. If it's the will of the committee, anybody else, anything that they wanted to add to the budget discussion? Okay, seeing none. So under old business, we have subcommittee reports, Building Facilities Capital Expenditure Committee. Dave, anything to report out on that committee?
Yes, we've, I think I've reported to this committee before that we invited, with the cancellation or the postponement of the special town meeting in January, the Capitals Committee believed that it was in the best interest to vet out the forced sewer main project in greater detail. We requested DPW's consultant. He agreed and attended our last meeting, Ziad, and I can't think of his last name, at Environmental Partners. And before I get started any further, anyone who's interested in this project, there's a final assessment available on the town's website. That assessment includes 4 options of a sewer forced line replacement running from Auburn Street, almost at 18 at that pump station, all the way to the city of Brockton, about 16,000 feet. What they identified was there's areas of external causing external corrosion of the pipeline, and they provided 4 recommendations. One recommendation was to install a new pipeline with a plastic composite, same size. Another less costly, that was at final estimates are at about 9 million. Plus there's some add-ons, but I'll talk about those later. There's a less expensive option of just repairing a certain section. And then there's 2 other options, which are kind of commingled. And that's the install the new pipeline, similar to option 1, but also cleaning and inspection and potentially repairing or retrofitting the old pipeline for potential future use. My question about in regards to potential future use of the old pipeline, their rationale to that was that it would allow for redundancy if anything would happen to the newly installed pipeline. And so kind of a flag went off up in my head, and I'm like, well, why are we doing this on day one when a piece of pipe may last you 20 to 30 years? And then the consultant had mentioned, well, no, we're expecting this pipeline to last 50 or greater years. So in my mind, not necessarily to the committee's mind, but in my mind, I put a question in: why are we spending additional monies, which could reach up to over $60 million, to retrofit an old line for that on day one of the installation of a new line for something that may last over 50 years? So what the DPW commissioners had requested their consultant to do was to provide the baseline estimate of installing the whole line, and then including anything after that as an add-on bid item. And they're going to deliberate what add-on bid items they're going to include. Some of those add-on bid line items include repairing a water line in an area which they're going to cross over a road. So it would allow for them to, dig one time in a roadway, so they wouldn't need to go near that in future areas and replace asphalt. Second item was to install a temporary gravel roadway in the easement areas to allow for access to those areas. And some of the add-ons included inspection of the old line, cleaning it out, and if it was feasible, to line it with I'm not sure the exact technology, but I think it's a liquid liner that then that you push through the old line at certain areas to allow it to seal, and then cap it at both ends, and then you would always have this redundant line in the ground for some time, potential future use sometime in the future. So all those add-ons is coming up to 16 million. And I didn't see the most recent DPW commissioners meeting, but I'm not sure if they've deliberated on what add-ons they anticipate using as part of the bid. That's about it. It's going to be the largest capital item on the warrant, and the funding source is going to be a borrowing, and then to pay off the borrowing will be an increase to the sewer rates. And I don't know what exactly the sewer rate is now, but they want to increase the sewer. It would result in increasing a sewer rate to $3 per cubic. I think it's per cubic foot. And I think right now the current rate is less than $1, even less than less than 50 cents, somewhere around there. So it's a very significant increase to the water rate. Lincoln's on that committee. He had mentioned that he was going to get information to present that directly to the board so they can vet it out as well on their end. And that's it. We haven't on that particular project. That's about it. On the other capital items, we've received some from schools, fire, and police, and technology. And with the warrant being open, I have requested Lincoln as the town administrator to request those directly from the department heads. So then we can, when the warrant closes, we can compare notes and make sure that we didn't miss any of the capital warrant requests to be on for the 2020 warrant, 2022 warrant, excuse me. And that's it. Yes, Kathleen.
Just a quick question, Dave. Are you talking, on my other computer, I was looking for the report on the fourth sewer main. Are you talking about the 51-page report? Is that where I should be?
No, I think it's greater than 51 pages. I don't know the exact, I don't have it in front of me. I don't know the exact date, but there's a draft one and there's a final one. There's not much difference from there's only a little difference from the draft to the final. And then what I wanted to warn everybody is if they're looking at that report, it provides cost estimates, but those cost estimates are not consistent with what the DPW commissioners are requesting as a capital article. They're requesting a few different changes to the bid.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. All right, so a lot of moving parts. Rosemary, I see your hand. I just want to say that, we appreciate the fact that the Capital Committee is taking the time to do the due diligence, and we look forward to the recommendation from the Capital Committee so that the Finance Committee can also make a recommendation for the warrant. So, Rosemary?
Yes, I wanted to know how that translated. You said it's about 3 times the amount. What does that mean? Your bill will be 3 times more? What is that? How does that translate, the cubic?
cubic feet. So you,
Yeah.
every water and sewer user in the town of Whitman receives a bill per cubic feet
Mhm.
and or cubic yard. I'm almost sure it's cubic feet, and there's a rate to that, and it should show on your water bill. In order to finance the in order to pay the yearly principal and interest on that, it's going to be about $1 million. So they need to raise revenues $1 million per year to pay off this, to pay this off. And that the DPW commissioners are discussing raising, not using any capital within the current retained earnings, and using a total rate increase to generate those revenues in order to pay out the principal interest.
So and what I'm hearing, and I'm seeing if it translates, that 3 times as much as what we're paying now.
It's fair. It's a lot. I don't know the exact number. I don't have it with me, but yeah, it's probably close to 3 times.
Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Go ahead, Lincoln.
Just quickly, just a friendly clarification. I believe the sewer rate right now is $4.50 per 100 cubic feet. And what the discussion I'd had with Superintendent Smith, Dennis was saying that they were expecting in the immediate term, I believe, $7.25 per 100 cubic feet. I'll let the committee know if I have those numbers wrong. I'm not 100%, but I'm 99% sure that those are the 2 figures that were under discussion. Now, one of the items that I'm requesting, and I think the Board of Selectmen wants to hear are the 3 different options now. So, and having a discussion with the commissioners, with the superintendent, and hopefully possibly with environmental partners as well, the consultant on this project, to get a clearer understanding of the options, and so that the Board of Selectmen can make a decision on which of the alternates, how much monies would actually be going on the warrant, since the selectmen would be deciding what is actually in the warrant, since they are the quote unquote owners of the warrant, so to speak. Hearing what the different options are, getting an estimate about a clear estimate about what their sewer rates would be going forward, with some input from the commissioners, and then making a decision about which of the alternates, which of the 3 would be on the warrant. So just a little bit of clarification on that.
Thank you very much for that clarification, Chuck.
Yeah, Lincoln is correct on the 450. The current rate is $4.50 per 100 cubic feet. I have my latest bill, so that is an accurate figure.
Thank you, Chuck. John Galvin.
Yeah, and just to clarify a little more too, that's just on the sewer rate. The water rate is not going out. You get 2 parts to that bill. So you get a water charge and a sewer charge, and it's only the sewer charge that's being increased, not the water as well.
Yeah, just for information, the water rate is $7.25 per 100 cubic feet at this moment.
Okay, thank you very much, John and Chuck. Okay, thank you, Dave, then, for the report. Any other questions for Dave and the Capital Committee? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to the next place setter, which is the Regional Agreement Amendment Committee. Nothing to report there. There has been no movement as far as scheduling meetings for that committee. Then the Middle School Building Committee.
Yeah,
John,
we have not met, and there is no meeting scheduled as of right now.
Okay, thank you. Rosemary, do you have a question on that?
It was the Regional School Agreement Committee. I know there hasn't been any discussion, but are we doing any researches? I know there's a lot of people talking about deregionalizing and all those things out on the internet right now. And I think that if we brought forth some information about, what it requires to deregionalize, so that we can take that off the table, that you have to have a school a certain size, and that we couldn't do it, just because I think that it's distracting to the conversation of the budget and everything else to have this
Yeah, I think
information.
as the finance committee member that represents on that committee, I don't think there's anything that we can do on what I was told by the chairman at the school committee meeting was that they weren't going to schedule a regional agreement amendment committee meeting until the town of Hanson had a recommendation from the deregionalization committee. So that's where it was left. I don't think that it should be the responsibility of Whitman to tell them, you know, whether or not it's feasible. I think that they're gonna.
In the end, it's the commissioner that has to say if it can be done, and there's laws that pertain to him.
Right, but it is the town of Hanson that has to make the decision.
Yeah,
not
so
the-
basically, we're not gonna have this meeting. I mean,
Right.
you're not gonna meet until they have that reached. Okay.
That's what we were told from the school committee. Kathleen.
Just have a quick question, for, excuse me, for John Galvin, and that has to do with the middle school proposal. Could you remind me, John, about what the size, the enrollment figure is that they're using, they being the MSBA, for a 5 through 8 middle school versus a 6 through 8 middle school?
Excuse me while I find it, hold on.
Yep. And while you're looking, I just want to say that I took the school enrollment from 2007 to 2019. And the only way you can really compare it is K through 8 because of Whitman versus Hanson having a different middle school class size enrollment, or sorry, grade enrollment. We're 5 through 8 and there's 4 through, we're 6 through 8, they're 4 through 8. Our middle school enrollment has only gone down about 7%, and theirs has gone down about 34, sorry, K through 8, 34%. So they're losing kids left and right. We are not. So our
Right.
enrollment is actually pretty stable.
So the recommendation was that, or I shouldn't say the recommendation, but it was the certification for a 6 through 8 would be 515 students. That's what the MSBA will base their funding on. And then a 5 through 8 is 675 students. Currently, right now, the administration is in favor of a 5 through 8 because in their mind, they want both towns in the district to be the same. But in my mind, that is a vote that's going to be up for the middle school committee and not for the administration. So both options are still open. They've met all the deadlines to date for the MSBA, so we're on track technically. I'm a little bit, I've said this in past meetings, I'm a little bit taken back that a lot of this work has been done outside of the committee by the administration without input, a lot of input from the committee. You know, I really want to, that's a big decision to make.
Yep.
Because it affects the taxpayers of Whitman. If we go to a 5 through 8 building, then it's going to cost the taxpayers more money. And it needs to be the decision of the committee on which way Whitman wants to go and not the administration's decision.
Okay, John, thank you. Kathleen?
Just as a follow-up, our current middle school enrollment is 579 kids. 515 is a ridiculous number to be budgeting for. This is not against you, John. Thank you for the time you put into that committee. It's the MSBA has to be realistic about the size of the school that we need in Whitman for our 6 through 8 enrollment. And our enrollment has not declined to the extent that the overall Whitman Hanson enrollment has.
Well, just
So
as a
thank you.
follow-up, not only did the MSBA do those numbers, but an outside company was hired, the New England School Development Council, and their research and their projections match the MSBA almost exactly. So both the MSBA's people figuring it and the independent contractor that was hired both came up with the same numbers over the projections. So there's really not a whole lot we can do about it. We can certainly build a bigger school if we decide we want to do a 6 through 8 and build it for more students. We can certainly do that. The problem is the MSBA is not going to pay us any additional money. They're only going to give us the money for what they say it to be. So if we add 50 students, the MSBA is not going to, we're going to fund that entirely. those additional, that size of that building for 50 more students. So
I get that, but if we build a school right now for 515 kids, our middle school enrollment will not fit in a brand new building.
Those are definitely good questions, and I hope that the committee does have that discussion when they finally meet next. John, thank you very much. Kathleen, thank you also. Anybody else on the Whitman Middle School?
Wasn't, you mentioned something about they wanted the two schools to be similar, Hanson and Whitman. So they wanted equity in the school, so some level of equity
they
in
want
terms
that,
of
they want both middle schools to have the same grade structure.
grade structure. Could
You
that
know, and
affect-
I think in the long run too, there's maybe some possibilities of what they'll do with the openings that'll happen in the elementary schools. And until we hear from them on what they want to do, it's impossible for us to make a decision if we don't know what that plan is. If they have a plan that they want to use, you know, the Conley and Duval for who knows what, let us know what that is. But you know, it's up to us to decide if we want to fund that additional amount to build a building like that and open up, you know, Conley and Duval for some other purpose in that space. Again, until we know what it is, can't really comment.
Okay, thank you, John. Okay, we only have a few other old business items. One obviously generated a lot of discussion, the non-mandated busing placeholder that we keep on our agenda. This is something we've been discussing for several years. It's an opportunity for discussion that we has been ongoing with the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen and the Regional District. And we did have a meeting. It was a very productive meeting in my eyes. A lot of discussion. The members of the Finance Committee that showed up, there was a lot of good discussion. Would anybody like to provide any information? Kathleen?
I have to confess that I did arrive a little bit late to that meeting and I missed the initial explanation of how the $400,000 line item, if we as a town chose not to fund it, would really only save us $64,000. So I'm still stymied by that math. And I have an email into John Tuffy, the business administrator, and Karen Villanueva, who is the director of transportation, to please explain to me how, if we chose not to fund $400,000, we'd really only save 64, because that's sort of voodoo math to me that I need a little bit more help working through before people start saying eliminating non-mandated busing will only save us 64,000. So that's a work in progress. I haven't heard back from the school people yet, but I do anticipate that I will talk to both Karen and John.
So this, again, it was an opportunity for the district to provide some information because we've been asking the questions. Just as a little historical context, we've been talking about two different things here too, and sometimes it gets a little confusing because I did have an opportunity to watch the last Board of Selectmen meeting, and it's not as simple as the Finance Committee thinking about zeroing out the line item for non-mandated busing without a care for the safety of the students. I mean, that to me is not a really good context to be putting this discussion into. What we are discussing is an opportunity for the town to create a pay-to-ride program. And this is the difference between zeroing out a line item and having a responsible collaboration to talk about this giant neon sign that says $401,000, and we do nothing about it but wring our hands every year. So what I hope comes out of this meeting that the district put on, to their credit, the information that was provided was very good. But I do also have, and I was there for the beginning of the meeting, have significant questions about the math and how we can't rein in some of the disparity between the cost of busing our students and the cost of the non-mandated aspect of it. So I think it's an important topic. I hope this is the beginning of a discussion and we can continue it. Dave.
We need to be fair to every party that was involved during that meeting. Essentially, what is going on is that you have a number of buses doing different routes in different sized routes. So you have, you know, 22 buses doing, some doing one route and they're done, some doing multiple routes, multiple schools. And what that results is, it's not a 1 + 1 = 2. So what the school department did acknowledge is that the $400,000+ line item includes a space on a bus for every child. What they admitted to is that there could be better management, and maybe if they were to communicate better with parents, and they were to not, and to, instead of saying, okay, every child has a bus, they say, okay, well, realistically, there's a percentage of kids that will never be on a bus unless it's extreme circumstance. So they've admitted to that, and they've admitted to that it's possible that they could rework the routes that would result in a cost savings. So that's what happened during that meeting. There's no way, there's no easy math to this, and it's based on number of buses, number of schools, number of routes, and how many schools the bus uses, including the number of students that are mandated to be bused. So at the end of the day, when this committee is asking for contracts and documentation like that, I think we've gone a little off base on just asking the fundamentals of the school, which they provided. And basically what they said, and I'll reiterate it here, is that they could probably manage their system a little better to remove maybe a tier, what they call tiers, remove a tier from a bus taking maybe 2 tiers and maybe down to a 1 tier, which would be a cost savings. And at the end of the day, maybe tens of thousands of dollars of cost savings for better management. However, by doing that, you know, there's other obstacles in the way. One being public safety, 2 being, you know, who's responsible to do it? Is it the Board of Selectmen or is it the school committee? And that's what's going on. It's in this hyperbolic talk, Rick, that you're using doesn't help the situation. You were there during that whole meeting. Be fair to the school. You don't need to use language like that. They provided a fair, concise, allowed everybody unlimited time to ask questions. So if anybody walked out of there not knowing exactly how they came up with their numbers, well, shame on you, because you had the chance. The school committee provided you a chance to ask the questions, to bring it back to this committee. So stop slamming them and saying, oh, it's up to the, you know, they didn't provide this, they didn't provide that. They provided everything. And it comes down to, I'll say it for the 3rd time, they could probably manage the program a little bit better to save tens of thousands of dollars. End of story. So any discussion from this committee should be on that line item in Article 2 should be not, can I have contracts? Do we feel, to the committee, school committee, did you manage this line item properly? Did you try to rework the numbers to try to save tens of thousands of dollars? No, then we start a discussion. If they say yes, great. That's all I got.
So Dave, just in response, when the school committee provides numbers at a meeting, we take the numbers. We can't digest all that information while we're sitting there in the meeting. I think they understand the fact that we're going to take the information and we're going to have a further discussion about this. It's not as it always has been, where, you know, this is what we decided and it's A or B. No, there's a discussion. There's some compromise. There's a discussion about where do we take the non-mandated busing. It's not just write a check for $401,000 and that's the way it is. I've obviously, by asking the questions that we have asked, we have a commitment from the regional district to take a look at the cost, as you said, do a better job communicating with the families and finding out who's not using the bus. They admitted that they don't have the best process for doing that. People are not responding when they don't use the bus. They would respond if they needed a bus, but not a lot of people are going to communicate that they have this option and they're not going to use it. So It's just, yeah, it is. It's a discussion. It's more information. It's where do we go as a community? It's a discussion. It's not just paying the bill. It is, let's talk about a long-term solution. Let's talk about, do we create a pay-to-ride program? It's not just no or yes. It's how do you evolve from where we are now? That's what I'm talking about.
This community, this committee is not a policymaking committee. We can recommend or not recommend line items in Article 2. And what I'm trying to get us make you all understand, who doesn't understand it yet, is that Article 2 has a line item for non-mandated busing of over $400,000. The school at the school meeting, the school admitted that, hey, we could probably manage this better, but it's not gonna reduce this down to zero. It's gonna reduce this down to tens of thousands of dollars and still provide anyone who wants a bus and provide the safety for the kids. So when this committee talks about what should we do about this line item, do we recommend it at full request? Do we not recommend it at full request? Or do we zero it out and let that discussion happen at town hall? Any discussion about a pay to ride program starts at the Board of Selectmen, starts at the school committee, not at this committee.
Thank you, Dave, for your comments. John Galvin.
Just to answer Kathleen's question, I think I very much pointedly asked that question right off the bat. How could we eliminate non-mandated busing and I couldn't fathomably understand is what I said, I think, and only save $60,000. And the answer I got is because even if we eliminate non-mandated busing, the high school still requires 20 buses to do it. So no matter what, we're still going to have 20 buses. Even if we take away all of the non-mandated busing, we're still going to have 20 buses going to the high school. And what we would do in eliminating non-mandated busing is eliminate the tiers, as Dave said. And, we could probably eliminate 4 or 5 tiers. I did some math. The tiers are about $1,000. So you're really not saving that much money when you're eliminating a tier. So, I think the question remains, we could do, in getting on David's point, if the school does a better job of figuring out who's taking a bus and who's not, it's very possible we can eliminate 3 or 4 tiers. I'm sorry, I said $1,000, it's $10,000. So if we eliminate, 3 or 4 tiers, we could do, everybody who's riding or wants to ride a bus, nothing can change. Everybody can still get it. And we could still eliminate 3 or 4 tiers if the school did a better job understanding who's going to ride a bus. They told me that everybody outside of 3/4 of a mile is given a seat on a bus. So basically, whether or not they take it or not, and they don't know who takes them or not. So they definitely need to do a better job in figuring out how many seats they're going to buy. And if we can eliminate 3 or 4 tiers or even 2 tiers, it's still going to save us, $30, $40, $50,000 and still have it. The other point I want to make it perfectly clear is that the administrative made it perfectly clear is there is no way that they are going to manage a pay-per-ride program. The superintendent said that flat out. The school will not entertain managing a pay-to-ride program. So if that was the case, it would have to be the town to manage it. And I can't imagine there's going to be anybody in the town that's going to be able to manage it either. So, I don't know if the pay-per-ride program is really going to have any legs to it if the school is unwilling to manage it. And they're the ones with all the information on the students. So if they're not going to manage it, it's probably not something that's going to stand very long.
Right, and that is true. It absolutely is true. And the Board of Selectmen has no appetite to change non-mandated busing in any manner. They made that very clear at their meeting, and the Selectman Lamartina made it very clear at the meeting too. So, yeah, but if we're not for the discussion, we wouldn't have any opportunity to realize any savings from that line item. That's all I'm saying. Go ahead, Rosemary.
I'm just trying to understand this, and just to clarify, mandated busing is covered by the state. We're reimbursed for our mandated sections of the busing, 100% by the state. Although it doesn't get back to us right away, the governor sets a price and an amount. I'm gonna look into why that occurs. If we're not maximizing the average amount, are they not paying us that section? So if they're saying they're not managing the bus route really well, are they putting 3 kids on a seat? Are they doing all of those cost saving? Not right now, of course, but regularly before COVID, all those things to maximize the bus, the buses. Those are questions we
They are
can ask.
not. They are not. They
They
made
are
it
not.
they made it perfectly clear. They don't really look into it at all. They basically look at anybody outside of 3/4 of a mile gets a seat on the bus, whether they ride it or not. So they have
Okay.
no clue if all of those kids outside of 3/4 of a mile. So theoretically, it's between 3/4 of a mile and a mile and a half. Anything
So-
over a mile, under a mile and a half is a non-mandated. Okay, but they buy
Yeah,
a
but the
seat,
mandated portions are paid for by the state, correct?
only reimbursed at this year. It went from 84% to 75% is the
To
reimbursement.
75%.
Right, so we just,
75% of what we ask. I'm wondering if we could find out from the state why they're doing that. Because is there an average? Are they
it
doing?
changes all the time.
It
They,
could change, but
one
based
of
on
the, one of the
what-
things he said several years ago, it was only like 60%. So it went up to, I think a couple years ago, they said it was like close to 90%. Last year it was 85, it was 84%, I think they say. I forget exactly what they said, but it dropped down to 75. That's a lot
There's
of
usually math behind that. There's usually a reason for it. It's not willy-nilly. So trying to find why they're doing that and to see if we can adjust
there's
what
nothing
we're
we can
doing.
do. It's adjusted, but well, there's absolutely
Now,
from the
at that point-
mandated part of it, there's nothing we can do because
Exactly.
So
So we're talking about the non-mandated portion, right? So any non-mandated portion, why would we have, if we're not paying for, or if we're having a discussion about non-mandated, why would we have to pay anything? Essentially, why would there be anything but with that little extra that the state isn't paying?
Well, it's not a little extra because you're required
Or
to
it's
buy
25 or whatever percentage.
You're required to buy 20 buses to mandated busing for the high school. So you're buying 20 buses. Whether
This is
they
what I'm saying.
go,
If we're not filling, maybe when the state looks at these numbers, and this is where I want to look at, they're saying, and there's overlap is what I'm saying. They're saying you need to fill that bus up for 3 kids per seat. They're saying they're not. So
We
maybe
can't-
they're funding
can't
us
do
at
that in a
that.
high school. You can't do 3 kids in a seat in a high
Well,
school.
I'm just saying, maybe there's something to that we need to look into. And
Well,
maybe
I
there's overlap.
I think
Well,
the
they're saying
discussion
the
is,
same thing that both John and I have said, is that everybody and Rick had said, everybody has acknowledged, the schools acknowledge that they could potentially better manage the system for a cost savings. Everybody agrees on that.
Okay,
But
thank you.
cost savings-
May I,
Go
Rick?
ahead. Go ahead, Chuck.
$400,000.
All right, may I? And
Yes,
I'm
go
not going
ahead.
to be long-winded, whatnot.
Go ahead.
Dave, I agree. We're not a policy-setting committee. However, if the finance committee didn't zero in on that line item, this discussion wouldn't have started. If we can save $64,000 on it, and that's a little more than 15%. So you know what? I think we're doing our job. If we can get them to manage it better, just like the audit that hasn't been done. I mean, it's a big budget. If there's not a lot of money to go around. So I think we're doing our job if we can cut 64,000 out of it.
Absolutely. I
Thank you.
absolutely agree with you, Chuck. And right, I've said that to other people as well. However, the way in which this committee went forth in trying to gain the information in retrospect, it could have been done maybe a little better, in my opinion.
Okay.
Understood.
Thank you, Dave, for your opinion, as usual. Kathleen, did you want to add something? Okay. All right, are we moving on then? If anybody has anything further they'd like to provide about non-mandated busing, we'll move. The other item that's a longstanding item on the agenda is the audit. Anything to report out of that, Lincoln?
Yes, so I did a little bit of more research into this issue. I want to make sure that I was fully up to speed on it. I think this is something that this committee's discussed previously, but I want to be clear on one thing. So the amount, the half of this audit that would be Whitman's responsibility, that amount is not currently appropriated. So, I want to be clear on that piece. So I think, if it's, if the policy directive is that, we still want to pursue this, that amount, should be, in my mind, appropriated by town meeting. So, that's one thing I want to discuss. The town of Hanson has appropriated their funds. I think at this moment, they seem more focused on the deregionalization conversation that was referenced earlier in this meeting. But that said, I think it kind of comes back down to currently those monies are not appropriated for Whitman. So I'm not, I don't really have too much else to say about it at this moment, except, whether or not there's a desire to appropriate those monies or not.
Okay. All right, thank you. So the annual town meeting, special town meeting warrants, they're open, they're not closed. And as Lincoln mentioned, the Board of Selectmen joint meeting is scheduled for April 13th. That was the date, is that correct?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, can you say that again?
April 13th is the date that has been established by the Board.
That is correct. That is correct. Thank you.
Okay. So communications, I did send out the communication from Norfolk County Agricultural High School, and it basically set the tuition rates for 2021 to 2022. In-county tuition rates, $2,200. Out-of-county tuition rates, $24,100. Currently, the town of Whitman has 9 students enrolled in Norfolk Aggie. As of February 12th, there are 7 students who have applied for admission. Please be aware that as the year unfolds, enrollment may change. Additional students may be offered admission and will move from the wait list to active enrollment. And conversely, some students withdraw from enrollment. So they do provide this information. And again, that was in the mailbox from Norfolk County Agricultural High School. So, John Galvin.
Yeah, I think that's something we need to find out. Like if those 7 students get accepted, and how will we be made aware of that? And because if those 7 students get accepted, plus the current ones that Ken mentioned, there was actually one special ed, so that currently right now, next year, he looks at, it's 198,000 for their assessment for the current students. Plus we have the 7 possible students. If that happens, then that's significantly above the 294 that we have in there. It's like 360 if all of those students attend. So my question is, how do we get notified if those 7 students get accepted and attend?
Well, this communication did come to the Finance Committee. I'm sure Town Administrator will have communications ongoing with the superintendent. Is that correct?
That's correct. If I could just add to that. So we can learn until the beginning of school in August or September whether or not a student is going, unfortunately. So the answer to your question, John, is unfortunately, we really won't know for sure until the school year begins.
So theoretically, we need to appropriate not only the 198,000, but we need to appropriate the possibility that 7 students may attend. So we just added another $70,000 or $65,000 to that line item. And I think that's why we've over appropriated in the past, because you have to consider the fact that those 7 students may attend in May, and we don't find out until August that all 7 are going. So, theoretically, we have to cover it, or we have to appropriate it at a fall town meeting. So I think that's kind of where we're at, is that, we got to look at 198,000. We know for sure the possibility of 7 times 23,634 exists. So if we don't have that number in there and they all go, we're in trouble.
Right. Rosemary.
Yeah.
How much did we have appropriated for last year?
Hold on. I just had.
And did anybody not go?
294,174.
Okay, and how many students didn't end up going, or did we have any?
That was, I believe, in an email that Ken sent.
It was like 2, was it?
I think he said there was some, hold on.
And while he's looking for that, I think the previous town administrator in the past, I'm not sure if it's when all you guys were on the committee, he basically kind of, just phrased it the same way John did. And you have to budget for them. And that tends to be why there's a lot of money left in that line when they don't go. And we've been able to utilize it for reserve or line item transfers later in the year.
Yep.
Yeah.
that's correct. Yep. Thank you, Chuck. So that information was in Ken's email that I read last week, but I did forward to the committee. So. All right. We did, the only other communication is that we did get an email from the new Board of Health department head. I did forward that to the committee too late this afternoon. Daniel Kelly is now the department head for the Board of Health. So I did follow up after I forwarded his communication to the full committee. I did give him a welcome and let him know that Chuck Colby is the liaison to the Board of Health. And if he had questions, I'm moving forward to contact him or myself as we move through the budget process. So anything else under other business? Anybody? Dave?
Yeah, I'd like to, as the chairman of the Capitals Committee, I'd like to ask a favor of the chairman of the FinCom Committee. It came to my attention in watching a past meeting in which I was not in attendance that the chairman had requested a Capitals Committee update from a member of this committee who was not on the Capitals Committee. I would just like to ask that if you're looking for an update as part of the record, that you get that update directly from either the chairman, vice chairman, or any other designated committee member of the Capital Committee.
Certainly. I apologize, Dave. No purposeful usurping of your authority was intended. So.
No usurping. And secondly, I'd like for the chairman to remove his passive aggressiveness towards me. This is not, it happened at tonight's committee meeting, past committee meetings, and it's a tool of the weak-minded, Rick. So I'd like for you to eliminate it completely. Okay. Stop acting passive aggressively toward me.
Okay.
We have Whitman's kids here, and you're showing a poor example by acting passively aggressively. Talk to me in a polite manner. Eliminate the passive aggressiveness. Thank you.
You've got my commitment, Dave. Thank you for bringing that.
See how worth that is.
Are we, Mr. Chairman, are we open and available for any other comments on budgetary?
Sure. Go ahead, Chuck.
So what I wanted to touch upon is something that's gone on for quite a few years. When we've found ourselves in this fiscal crisis / just tight budgeting. In the past, we've looked to managers to lead a little bit by example, and we've had them go for a 1% salary increase on a COLA or 1.5%. And I know this year we asked them to come in level funded on the COLAs for themselves. Now, obviously, all the union contracts, it's a little different because they're already in contract years, and most of them been getting their 2.5%. The previous town administrator had always said it was always a challenge, but you never wanted to have contracts all renew the same year. It was better to stagger them out. Now, I believe this year we had a little anomaly for different reasons, and I think a lot of contracts with the unions are coming up. Also with the schools, I believe I saw a little bit of the school committee meetings, so I could be wrong, but maybe that, Lincoln, that it seems like most of the unions are coming up for negotiations. So one thing that struck me, I noticed a couple meetings ago on the school committee meeting, that the school committee awarded the superintendent a new contract already with 2.5% increases for, was it 3 years or they gave him 6 years? I forget. But already they gave him a 2.5% COLA, anticipating, that whatever Madden report, or we can go 2.5. Well, our revenues are tight. The only thing we can control, and it's been talked about before, was maybe there's a year that we go for 1% across the board, or maybe there's a year when there's no raises. When you throw all the numbers together for all the union employees, I think there's been numbers thrown around where it's around $1 million something. That would do wonders to kind of do a reset and maybe get us over a hump. However, like I said, I was a little disappointed that they gave him 2.5% for 6 years, along with some other perk that I didn't know about, that we was going to get $3,000. So it might be hard to negotiate with unions when they know their managers are already going to get their 2.5%. Me personally, I was hoping that there was going to be some good, honest negotiation, knowing that the town is in a little bit of a difficult situation going forward, and just hoping that maybe there could be a different approach than what's happened in the past. So thank you for that, letting me speak.
Okay, Chuck, Lincoln, any follow-up on collective bargaining process? I know it's a difficult process, obviously, so.
Yeah, I mean, so the 5 town side unions are the contracts are up on June 30th. I certainly wouldn't really want to say anything else other than that in an open session, since it's certainly going to be the topic of collective bargaining. I'm happy to give, if this committee would like that, I'm happy to give a general rundown as to where we are in executive session late in the process, if that's desirable, but that's all I'd really want to say in an open session.
Understandable.
Understood. And I just wanted to get some of my thoughts out there. Nobody, it's just, I know that you got to do your collective bargaining and everything, but I hope that people are looking at different ways to save us some money, get us over the hump.
Okay, Chuck, thank you. Thank you, Lincoln. So I think that pretty much exhausts. Lincoln, anything you want to add from the town administrator's report?
Yeah, I don't think too much that we didn't already cover, except to say, just in follow-up to some of the conversation regarding busing. So there is each year in the state budget, there is a line item which funds regional school district transportation. So that is where just as a point of information to Rosemary's question, that is where the percentages arrive from. So it's in the state budget, it's line item 70350006. So that line item appropriates monies for that and has a dollar amount and specifies that no obligation of the state or Department of Elementary and Secondary Education may exceed that appropriation. So then the formula, my understanding of the formula is simply that it applies, the determine how many students are mandated, and the state will be assisting that transportation, and then divides that dollar amount equally, and that's why the percentages change from year to year, because the total appropriation changes from year to year. So just as a piece of information.
So that would, I guess my point would be, they must determine an amount that they're willing to spend. And we kind of, like we do here, we know our budget, and would hope the schools look at that and know their budget when they're looking to bus, or get a sense of. That's my thought. They must have a formula that they're determining how much it costs to bus each student. Right, something. But thank you for the line item. I'll do my research. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, and I wouldn't. I mean, and just for clarity, I mean, so particularly in this fiscal year 2021, the state didn't pass a budget until December, right? So there certainly wouldn't be in this particular year, and it's certainly in any other year where it's later, you know, it is what it is. And in this year, halfway through the year, we knew what that total dollar amount was. So.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, before I entertain a motion to adjourn, I would like to take this opportunity to recognize Max, Jackson, Colin, John, Aiden, and Mr. Ken for making it to the end of this meeting. That is quite an accomplishment, let me tell you.
Thank you, guys.
very
Great
much.
job, Max.
So
Thanks.
just a
Go,
just a
Jim.
quick thing, I just wanted to say.
Finally
Lucas?
free.
Did
And
we
then
lose
I'll let
Lucas?
Mr. Newman speak,
Thanks.
but just for the record, you guys have a great opportunity. You belong to Troop 22. That is an opportunity that you guys will only realize how great it was later on. I can tell you from firsthand experience, my son had an opportunity of a lifetime and I as well met the best friends that I still have through Troop 22. So your Scoutmaster, Dr. Warner, he puts in a lot of time and to your benefit. So with that, I would open it up if you guys, if the committee would agree just to hang around and answer any specific questions that Scouts may have. I will certainly direct your question to the member of the committee, maybe who has the most experience. So with that, go ahead. Anybody want to raise your hand and I'll have John unmute you if I can.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Max.
There were a few people, like Lucas, when that had to leave because something, I don't know if he had something with his family or whatever, but he probably would have made it to the end of the meeting. I don't know though.
That's all right. They made it halfway. It's quite an accomplishment anyway. So great. Any other Scouts have any question? Mr. Ken, is there anything you want to go ahead?
You muted, Jim.
Yeah, okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions, actually. Lucas wanted to know, what is a build year?
Good
Okay, so
question.
put that to our
Lincoln's
town
gonna be great for
administrator,
this.
Lincoln.
He's on his own finance committee.
So I'm using sort of a little jargon there, but I'm talking about that in contrast to a level services budget. So a level services budget would imply the amount of money that is needed to continue to provide the same level of services through fire, police, building commissioner, parks, recreation, all the things that this town does in the same way that it did in the prior year. And a build year would sort of imply that from a policy perspective, we as a town want to do something more than what we did in the prior year. And I wanted to say, Max, I wasn't a math major either, and that's okay. You don't need to be a math major to do this. So don't let that get you down.
Max is smart. You could do this, Max.
No, I couldn't.
You. Yes, you
I
could.
was half to sleep. That's just me.
Wouldn't be the first time someone who was half asleep in our meeting.
But Jackson, do you have any questions? I see you there.
Aiden Graves has a question. in the
Oh,
chat
Jack-
box.
Go ahead, Aiden. You have a question?
Oh, it's Aiden.
I have a question. What is possibly going to happen if the departments don't keep a stable sustainability or keep their money at a stable area so they don't lose money or anything? What would possibly happen?
That's a good question. Who wants to answer?
Why don't we let Lincoln answer?
Lincoln Town Administrator.
Go ahead, Lincoln.
I was hoping someone else could take that.
It's a great question.
It's a
Aiden. Thank
dirty
you.
word. It's called override.
Go ahead.
Well, I wouldn't say that, but I mean so basically the policy decision would be if there weren't sufficient funds to continue to do that as level services, then either the town would need to find new revenues from some other source, or the level of services would need to be reduced in some way because the state law requires that municipalities have a balanced budget so that revenues equal expenditures each year, or at least equal expenditures each year.
Okay, does that answer your question, Aiden? A great question.
That was
I
a
have a
good question.
question.
Excellent.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
How will the budget cuts affect like the police and fire department?
Okay, that's another good question. Who wants to take that?
So far, we have no cuts. So far, we're doing pretty good, and it sounds like a lot, but I think we do pretty well. And so far, that's not the case.
Yeah, so good question.
No, and
Yeah.
Max, also, if all the town departments compromise, kind of follow the lead, and I think that that'll minimize anything like an obviously override or any layoffs if everybody comes together and does what they can to watch their budget and keep it under a certain percentage.
So you guys asked some good questions. I just want to let you know too that, like your scoutmaster and assistant scoutmaster, all the members of this finance committee are volunteers. They take their time out of their, away from their families to work on the budget. So to make sure that the town's resources are equally distributed as well as possible. So Matt, your question about the police, very important. Obviously, we want to make sure that we fund public safety, because it's an important aspect of our community. So any other questions at all?
Well, I have to go, so goodbye.
Okay, thank you for coming in. Mr. Ken.
Yeah, I was just gonna. I have two questions. Two scouts had to leave for another merit badge, but I was going to give kudos to Max because he's the only one that actually stayed on and didn't fall asleep on camera. I don't know what's going on with the other guys. So
we all fall asleep sometimes.
We do a good job of.
Cup of coffee before this meeting.
So my older scouts, who are both juniors in high school and on their way to Eagle, is Delaney, which this is great. We have a great, I don't know if you knew this, but Troop 22G, back 2 years ago, they let girls in scouts, and we've got a small troop going on right now, but we got two girls that are really in a good place to make Eagle. My daughter's one of them. But very excited about that. Delaney has a question on, she wants to know how you decide where the money goes when you end up over budget. Like, how do you know where to move money to and from?
Well, as you can tell, that was the most challenging part of our meeting, was the beginning when we're talking about how do we move forward to talk about where we're going to close the gaps, because there's a big budget gap, as you know, right now. It's and the discussion is going to involve not only the finance committee, but the town administrator and the board of selectmen on how we close that budget gap. And so some of it will be to reduce the budgets that were submitted, but some of it may include reserve funds that we have. Hopefully not a lot of it will come out of that, because that's more or less, we have reserved the free cash, which is one of the accounts, and we use that recently to fund capital projects. So again, that's an important aspect of our town, is to maintain our capital assets. So Rosemary, then Kathleen, and John.
I think one thing you should let Delaney and anyone know, the end decision is always the public's. We make general suggestions, and the selectmen guide policies on where we're kind of going, like chart a course, and we're sort of like how much gasoline do you put in? And you guys put the gasoline in. You guys make the decisions on town floor. If you don't like that we're investing in too much in one thing or too little, you can make motions and say, no, that's not what we want. And in the end, we're honored to be trusted. We do put a lot of work and try to be as honest as possible and look at the needs. But sometimes, communities have a different, somebody might want to present something different. And in the end, we are run by the people. So who makes that decision? The people make that decision in the end.
Good point, Rosemary.
Right.
Kathleen?
And
Go ahead, Kathleen.
Okay, so what I want to contribute, and it's very brief, is that the 9 of us are volunteers. We are appointed by the town moderator, who is an elected official, And what he does his best to do is to get a cross section of the community representing different perspectives, different, as I started out at the beginning of the meeting saying, we have different opinions on issues, but we try to share them with each other and without being aggressive or insulting to each other, but we hold our ground. We do our research. We have our rationales for why we support certain positions or oppose certain positions. And as a group of 9, I think we work very hard together to be respectful and share our opinions, but represent a cross section of this town. So I think that the town moderator does a nice job of trying to make sure that the group of 9 does not speak with one voice, that we have 9 different voices and all voices are heard.
Thank you, Kathleen. John Noon, do you have something?
Both speakers covered it very well. I've got nothing more to add.
Okay, Chuck?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon a little bit what Rosemary said. So you guys, when you're old enough, town meeting votes, people vote. The people who show up at town meeting, who actually go, they are the ones who make the final decision by voting yes or no on all these things we're discussing and the monies of the taxpayers being spent. So very important, when you are old enough to vote, please get involved. If you care about what goes on, get involved. If your parents don't go to town meeting now, encourage them to, because anybody who's really concerned, if you want to have a say in what goes on in the town and how your money is spent, it's very important that you show up and voice your opinions by voting.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Okay, Mr. Ken, that conclude your question?
That's it. Scotty had a question for it was a school committee question about how they decide to make budget cuts. So I'm going to refer him to the school committee on that one. And I just had one last question and a comment real quick. First of all, how do I get some of that free money?
Oh, free cash.
Free cash.
That would be really cool.
That's a misnomer. It's not free, believe me.
And the last thing really was thank you very much for taking the extra time and the questions. That wasn't really part of the requirement, and I really appreciate it. Some of the things you said, we've said during the merit badge. This concludes it for many of them, and we couldn't do it without you. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for letting us join this time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Great.
Good luck.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you very much.
Thanks,
All right,
Jim.
well, then I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
Okay, we got a
Second.
motion. Second, roll call vote, Kathleen.
Yes.
John Noon,
Yes.
John Galvin,
Yes.
Dave,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Ralph,
Yes.
Al,
Yes, sir.
Rosemary,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Thank you all.